con conopa en mano, oriundo de esas tierras sacras, inca e preinca, invoco la presencia de nuestros ancestros, andinos, selváticos y costeños, citados de nombre en tradición y cultura, procedentes de esos lugares celestiales y presentes sobre la tierra. Reconocidos sean por ellos escuchando sus nombres. Chavín, Tiahuanaco, Paracas, Nazca, Moche, Lambayeque, Chimú, Chachapoyas, Huari e Inca, bien presentes con su sabiduría y sus buenos remedios. Ofrezco este incenso a la vida de todos ellos presentes en esta comunión de amor y de entrega de estas artes curanderas, camasqueras y pacocuna. Recibido sea esta plegaria y esta oración con buena intención. Que así sea y así será, en nombre de mis mentores y maestros, don Celso Rojas Palomino, de Salas Chiclayo, y don Benito Coriguán Vargas, de Guasao, Cosco. The field is open, my beloved brother.
It is my pleasure to have you on the Shamanic Path. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our talk with Don Oscar Miro Quesada. Don Oscar is a Camasca curandero and Alto Misayoc adept from Peru, founder of the Pachacuti Mesa cross-cultural tradition of Peruvian shamanism, and founder of Heart of the Healer, and one of my dear friends and mentors on the path. I'm really happy to have you with us for this discussion today.
Es un honor, hermano lindo. It's an honor.
Well, as we were discussing what subjects we should tackle here, what we hit upon was really talking about what the Buddhists would call the view, how we orient toward the shamanic path, how we orient toward our own initiations and our challenges on the path, how we work with the guidance we receive from intuition, from spirit, from our teachers, and how our lives are asked to change as a result of stepping further onto the path with each new experience and each new initiation. So I would love to get some overview thoughts on what the view means in terms of our shamanic initiations.
Well, your question is very pertinent because of also being part of SoundsTrue for so many moons that has been dedicated to disseminating Buddhist wisdom traditions throughout the world. And the parallels with the Camasca tradition of Peru and the Paco tradition of Peru when it comes to Buddhist ritual practices, as well as the attitude and perspective and position of the spiritual aspirant, are very close. There's many, many parallels. So as I understand it, the Samadhi, which is the Pali name for the view according to the Buddhist teachings, is the first of the eightfold path, which is right understanding. And it's important to clarify that in the Camasca tradition, right action, or which is yankai, which is industriousness, conscious right livelihood and work, is more of a perspective and a position than an actual practice. Now, it does involve a sense of moral obligation, and it involves an experience of connection with an ancestral wisdom tradition, much like in Buddhism. Yet overall, it is about a process of transformation, so that if we could use the Buddhist notion of Dharma, a right view, or known as vista con virtud, or the virtuous view or virtuous sight, involves attaining an understanding that it's all about really living your Dharma. It's all about the embodiment of that Dharma in a non-attached manner. So it's very important as shamanic aspirants and participants in the great work, because from the individual level of having received guidance and awakening of the powers and magic associated with our communion with the shamanic universe, many forces and many visitors, many voices from a multitudinous landscape of spirit allies can begin to flood one's consciousness. And it can become a very busy experience walking this path. So the Buddhist practice of mindfulness is also part and parcel, at least of my own initiation into the Kamaska tradition through my mentor, Don Celso. To begin with, it's about cleansing the self of extraneous interferences. And the way that we do that to develop a perspective, a lived approach to life that is in service of the great web and of all sentient beings, is to die to the self, to let go of any attachment to one's effort or outcome. So it's a paradox in a sense, because you are called to be of service, and at the same time, you must deny that call as being chosen for that service. An annihilation of complete egoic purpose and an opening to the cloud of unknowing that must always be part of the path, because the mystery is more important than the gnosis. The embodiment of wisdom, of wonder, is the key to a magical life. And as you well know, my good brother, magic in the Peruvian sense of the word, as you've experienced with your many pilgrimages to these powerful sacred sites and mountains and apus, teaches you how to write your own universe, how to write the story of being both a ecological and cosmic being that must rediscover their destiny as a unified expression of Mother Nature. So the view is about that, and we call that vista con virtud, or vision born of virtue. That would be my opening response to your inquiry.
Well, it seems that there are some interesting, what feel at first like contradictions or tensions within this. Because when we step onto this path, one thing that we may find is that it does give a vast sense of personal meaning and fulfillment. And at least initially, most people experience that they've stepped into a better, richer, more magical story, not that they've stepped out of the ego's wants and desires and storytelling entirely. And right view itself isn't, it's not like the stone tablets from Moses. It's something that works more like water, right? It's whatever we see at this moment, but we always have to be willing to revise and let go based upon our experience and based upon the next step we take where the view changes. And that seems to be one of the conditions of being here in a body, being here in time, and learning our human lessons of relationship and community bit by bit and step by step.
Grounded in the process of transformation, because as you become more and more committed to what is known as the kapak rurai, or the great work of being of service to your community, to the earth itself, learning to navigate the wonderfully unpredictable nature of life is key to not drowning when you are in the midst of those challenging moments when you conjure spirit visitors that you're not familiar with out of context. So it requires discernment and discipline. And by discipline in the Kamaska tradition, we mean being a disciple to yourself, capital S, to that Atman, to that universal self that is source, really, that is both your being and the ground of being. Words fall short, as you well know, because this is a subject that philosophers have tried to wrap a nice little comfortable bow around and present it to the world as truth for millennia. And they're still struggling with that because, as you well know, there is absolutely no absolute truth, only relative truth. So therefore, this path is one fraught with uncertainty, surprise, wonderment, and an opportunity to surrender to something that is going to take lifetimes for us to finally reconcile as our true calling. And that is to live the notion of I am immortal in being, beyond form, fearlessly free to be all worlds, times, and places that summon me.
It also requires that we live with our mistakes and our missteps and the ways that even unintentionally we end up doing harm to other people, taking the wrong path, making the wrong choice. Can you speak to how the deepening on the shamanic path addresses this in terms of giving us trust that we're doing the best we can in any given moment, we're orienting by our own deepest knowing and intuition, and at the same time, the outcomes may not be what we intend or what we'd hoped for. And sometimes we're asked to give up a lot before we come into what comes next.
That's a very delicate subject matter because you could say that it takes a level of spiritual maturity as well as an awakening to that which is much greater than oneself to serve without the fear that you may be bringing forth or awakening forces and powers that are beyond your ability to manage and direct. At the same time, it's very simple, based on my own personal experience, to determine when I'm doing the right thing. And that is by seeing the vulnerability that another that I am serving is able to embrace, and by the safety that they are able to exude forth, and their trust in the fact that my presence has allowed them to contact a place in themselves that has long been craving and yearning to be recognized. So to me, an antidote or a preventive to really screwing things up as a healer, as a ceremonialist, as an invocateur of the magic that permeates the universe, is to be very conscious of the space that I create, the geometrical or geomantic patterning of it, the repeated contact with the same spirit guide or power that has been proven to serve a person in a particular manner for healing of various conditions, and to trust in the fact that even if a mistake is made, that mistake was made not because I came from a place of identification as an ego that needs to be recognized as the source behind that healing service, but just as an instrument of grace that is able to empty and allow the transmission of medicine that is far beyond my feeble human capacity to really have the right to say, I know what's happening, if this makes sense. So keeping that very open, non-attached position or perspective is very, very important. Whether I answered your question or not stands to be seen.
Well, I think that's exactly what I was pointing toward. And my own experience is that when we offer ourselves to a situation where we have an opportunity to, as you said, be an instrument of grace or serve as a transmission of truth, or however you might want to describe it, it's so clear within our own somatic experience that we're not the source or originator of what's coming through, that we're an implement, we're a conduit. And so the more times we have that experience, I think, the easier it is to simply stop telling any stories about it, stop taking any not personal responsibility, but personal achievement because of the healing or the teaching that has come through.
Exactly. And that is made much easier when you realize that not to serve is a sin. It's a violation of one's compacto, of one's oath to be that instrument, to offer the assistance of the unseen, of the not yet beholden, to work through you. So meditation is key, quieting the mind, combined with focused attention and concentration in a particular relationship with a deity, with a mountain spirit, with a river spirit, with a stone relative, and cultivating that on your own and knowing that you can draw on that and embody it within a ceremonial artifact, an arte, that will forever contain that same experience of communion that you had, that the person that you let hold this arte, or that you blow its virtud, its virtue into them in a particular place of their body, is guaranteed that the purity of your intention and the clarity of your vision of healing will supersede any of your own intra, inter, or transpersonal weaknesses that you may have not yet taken the time to do an inventory about and work your fourth step, which happens. In other words, not to offer oneself as a source of healing grace in the world once you've awakened to communion with pure awareness and the absolute is a violation of life. It goes against, it's what we call hucha. It accumulates density. It accumulates, sluggish vibratory fields.
And it seems that in this moment on Earth, given the various crises we see around us, and I'm sure humankind has always felt this way, and at the same time, it does seem that with the scope of the destruction and with our ability to see and know what's happening around the world, it's even more important right now that we step into what we're being called to do, that it's no longer appropriate to say, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until I know more. I'm going to wait until I'm confident. I'm going to wait until I think I have it right.
Ditto. I couldn't agree more. The situation, though, is that our human insecurities sometimes want to take precedence over our service imperative. And so therefore, even myself, I have had a crisis of faith at certain moments in my life where I just became very fatalistic and, and cynical even, which is not a good energy to embody. when you just, it's not worth it. Yet the option of following that through was more torturous than saying, okay, this is only one perspective, and that, you know, reality may not be as prosaic as it seems, you know? And so therefore, get yourself back together, Oscar, and, you know, go pray to your ancestors, you know, bring in the forces of nature that you have been blessed to have been in communion with over years of doing pilgrimages to sacred sites around the world. Anchor them in your artes and stop with the selfish infantilism and, you know, need to be the victim of such great responsibility in the call, you know. So it's a total, and I'm not saying it's over, but that type of dance between the awakened me and the identified ego personality continues. Maybe at times not consciously, but for sure in my dreaming, for sure in my my effort to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's an issue that I feel that most of us on the path have to confront.
Well, especially in the West, these this perfectionism combined with this emphasis on individuality is a poisonous brew when it comes to really stepping into something beyond ourselves. But what you were saying about the ego and its patterns, one thing I've noticed is when those moments come up, they may still have the same grip they had before, but what I can see is I can see the wheels spinning and digging the same ruts that they've dug before. And so there's a difference between choosing that path where essentially you know what's going to happen because you've played it out before, versus choosing the path of spirit, choosing stepping into service where you really truly have no idea what's going to happen. And at a certain point, there's so much more juice to that than there is to playing out the same patterns that we've been playing out since childhood.
The more times you've been given the opportunity to truly die, there's much more juice in encountering that unknown. And given that life is all about transformation and coming to peace with the fact that everything you do is really going to dissolve into the impermanence of the great universal being that we call creation, and still be okay with the fact that, okay, I wore this face, I wore this identity for this particular period of time, and now it's time to change. It's time to put on a new disguise. Yet next time I put on this disguise, I'm going to make sure that I know it's a disguise and not my true self. It's the only way, the best way I can articulate what we're talking about in a manner that keeps me right, keeps me honest.
Yeah.
With, you know, with what I'm asked to do.
Well, there's a playfulness and a joy to that, to don one's identity while at the same time putting no particular weight on it or expectation around it. We were talking before we started about the shamanic path, and that inevitably for anyone who goes far enough, there are things that you're going to be asked to let go of, things that you're going to be asked to step into. Are there general rules as to how that might work for people in terms of what you might need to let go of, what you might need to lean into that's a little uncomfortable, or are those different for everybody?
Well, there's a subjective component to it, of course. You know, there may be a universal objectivity, but That's a charged question, brother, because we are, as humans, we are hardwired to be in relationship. We know ourselves through the other. I mean, the way we are, you know, tuned to take in the world through openings in our body, our eyes, our mouth, our nose, our ears, our hand. I mean, that's the way we exist in relationship, right? So being able to nurture relationships that allow you to honor the other as the self will less and less and less necessitate a letting go of the toxic relationships, because our interaction, our reciprocity with that multi-voiced landscape that we know as shamanic reality is all about relationship and sacred reciprocity and Aini, right? And therefore, that exchange of life force as well as visionary destiny with seen and unseen others, it must be cultivated, in my experience at least, in a manner in which the moment that I meet another, that when I hug them, I feel resistance. I feel a metallic plate where it doesn't allow my heart to be received. I know that that person is someone that if I continue to have relationship with, is going to engage my rescuer, the old me that wants to say, no, I am omnipotent. I can deal with this. I can overcome this. I've got a bunch of good shamanic mystery tools under my belt that I can soften this person's heart in a couple of days. And what I'm leading to is that over time, I've learned that if I invest my life force and my shamanic skill in trying to rescue everybody, it's going to be impossible for me to truly live my dharma. And so that's what I feel is most important for us to learn to let go, is those impassable encounters with energetic fields, whether human or not human, that are succubuses, that want to, you know, absorb or deny the love that is our essence as a passerby on this earth.
Do you think people have a tendency to get involved with those energies because in a way it puts off having to actually make decisions about our own path? In other words, it engages us, it calls out our energy, it makes us feel like we're doing something, but at the same time, it's still sort of within the realm of ego and the realm of what's known. And as long as we keep engaging in that way, we don't have to step fully into the unknown.
Well, of course. I mean, that's classical psychological defensiveness in a way, but only in the rarest of people can you come to to a realization of acting from a place of discernment when it comes to establishing a relationship or offering a particular healing. When you're young, it's easier when you are older and more experienced in the world to not, you know, pull these relationships to you as fodder, as compost for your own growth. I mean, the pain and suffering, which is part of life, that I've experienced through toxic relationships has been more devastating than having any type of operation I've had on my physical body, because it's there for much longer, number one, and it's always reminding you of what a fool you were. And what part of you is being reminded? The one that feels self-importance, the one that has the ego static identity. So I would say it's inevitable to not have toxic relationships unless you're born in an ashram, in a monastery, in some sort of isolated community that has been established as a place of great initiation at the soul level for the earnest aspirant of that path. Because and even in those cases, even in the most noble of hermetic orders around the world, there have been very toxic relationships that resulted in the spiritual teachers that once were revered to become totally self-serving and decimate a well-intended community of practitioners, right? They're all over the place. It's a tricky dance.
Well, how do we become not an ordinary fool? In other words, the one who goes, I can't believe I did that. What did they think of me? But become a real fool, a tarot fool, a trickster, a sacred clown, a heoka. How do we become the kind of fool that never knows what's going to come next or what's going to come out of our mouths, and allows all that to pass through directly from spirit?
Well, for the Western practitioner, to don or wear a medieval outfit, just like the image of the tarot on the card. I'm not saying this to joke. By embodying not only the image, but the living archetype of that particular wisdom within that form, and bringing it into your life. Programming your dream time to have an encounter with it, establishing that intimacy with the principle or the archetypal constellation that has touched the hearts of millions of people over countless moons in history and still finds relevance in the modern, postmodern, acculturated, techno-industrial realm that we're into, that denies such things. But it's still alive. Shamanism is still, alive and very healthy and, expanding in its appeal to people that rarely even see the light of day because they're so consumed in their office work. So yes, I feel that befriending any source of ancestral wisdom, of perennial understanding by growing corn and potatoes with it, as they say in the Andes, by giving it form, by writing a song and performing that song about it, by painting it, by drawing it, by dancing it, by sculpting it, by bringing it into three-dimensional form is a good way of guaranteeing you are not going to be bamboozled by the lower astral enticers on this path. As you well know, in this shamanic work, we're dealing with space, time, energy, vibration, and pure awareness. The three dimensions of space, right? The fourth dimension of time, the fifth dimension of vibration, of energy, excuse me. The sixth vibration of vibration, because before vibration, energy is a vibration, and the seventh dimension, which to my knowledge is the ultimate dimensional experience we can embody as humans regarding vibrational frequency, both in body and in consciousness, is all about pure awareness. It's all about being. Everything else is about becoming. So when we do the work, especially in a ceremonial context, we pattern, at least in our Pachacuti Mesa tradition ways, we pattern the ceremonial ground to contain the potential of either 5 dimensions or 7 dimensions. And within that, we create the field that is supportive of us transmuting ourselves into expressions of whatever deified memory of our ancient ones is necessary to bring forth into the life of those we serve. It's the best way I could express it, if you get my drift.
So for someone watching from home right now, especially those who might be newer to this path, let's say they engage in a ceremony or a ritual, they do a meditation. What are the things that people can do on their own that help lay the groundwork for this so that they have the best opportunity to be connected with spirit, with being as source, and not be brought back into these ego considerations in their own ceremonial work?
If you do not have the good fortune of having a guide, a human embodiment as a teacher, what I suggest is making Pachamama or Mama Pacha, the natural world, your mentor in any way possible. And reducing the amount of stimuli and distraction and simplifying. Simplicity is transformation. And therefore, and less is more with what I'm trying to say. So make a concerted effort to spend as much time in an unadulterated, pristine, natural environment, simply laying on the earth, listening to the wind, hearing the voices of our animal relatives, letting yourself be held by the womb of Mother Nature in a manner that you are able to let yourself become an child, an infant, even an embryo that is now being gestated to a new life through the sanctity of the earth. Keep it very, very simple, and reduce all other extensions of yourself that are energy depleting. In other words, disappear. Commit yourself to a life fast and an emptying of self. Combine that with meditation, then combine that with some beautified vision of what it is possible for you to be on this planet and to rediscover your destiny as both an ecological and a cosmic being, because that's the bottom line. Finding that marriage between being earthborn and starborn.
And the Andean traditions show that so beautifully. There's always that awareness of that dual origin, it seems to me, in the Andean cosmovision.
In everything. And anything that has to do with pre-Columbian cosmology is about the marriage of cosmos and earth and ecology, everything. The words you speak, the breath you take, the fukui, the kintu, the prayers you offer, the chaiwas, they are always founded upon the fact that you are the intermediary between heaven and earth.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to talk a little bit about something we were discussing prior to starting the recording, and that's how these relationships we develop, not just with human teachers on the path, but with an apu, with a spirit guide, with our artes, how those can be developed over time and offer us support on our journey. Let's talk about the artes to begin with. We were having this discussion earlier. How does the intention the prayers that we put in the sacred objects that we work with, how does that then support us in doing our work? Call us to our truth, in a sense.
Mhm. Well, in the curandero tradition, we call that sintonizando nuestras artes, or synchronizing or one's medicine pieces with a source of power that that comes from a sacred site or an ancient temple, or a natural landscape shrine. Doing pilgrimage to that place, carrying the arte with you, and setting up a small altar with deep reverence in your heart for the blessings to be even alive in that ancestral place of power is a must. It's just the beginning and the foundation of everything. Performing acts of reverence in honor of the forces and powers of the natural world through your offerings of food, of mihushanku, of ritual feeding, much like putting out a spirit plate in native North American tradition, to feed the tirakuna, the watchers, the aukis, the nature spirits, the malkis, the tree beings, the machula aulanchis, the benevolent old ones, and the apukuna, to be a participant in the exquisite multiplicity of and blessing that the natural world has to offer us. If you get into that place, you become a vessel, so that every arte that you hold will be infused with the deep love and caring that defines your service path. Once that arte is embodied, there are many ways to continue its nurturance and keep it vital with its gamasta, with its creative power, through song, through prayer, through incense, through aromatic waters. Pick your style, as long as it all begins with authentic and genuine sense of reverence for the gift that it is to be a carrier of that power and that medicine piece. From there, the ceremonies that you offer will just effortlessly unfold, as long as you align yourself with that space.
Does it then require an act of trust on your part, or is that not even a question? Once you're in alignment, everything just sort of opens and flows naturally.
There are different stages, I would say, and this is for a whole other conversation. In recovery, there's a saying, fake it till you make it, right? So initially, you may have to pretend that you're connecting with a power and force greater than yourself that is going to be used for world good. Nothing wrong with that. Just like if you don't believe in some originating mystery behind it all, still pray to it. What do you got to lose? It may enrich your life. If not, it's just a little time that you've spent. So again, at the beginning of the path, on the path, I suggest the earnest seeker to experiment, to be creative, and to learn how to imagine, use the power of your disciplined imaginative faculty to make contact with beauty and with the grace that is infused in everything we understand to be an earthly experience as passerbys. And be always humble, and be always generous, and make your life an expression of gratitude, because it is through our presence that more teaching and more healing is attained than through any doing. presence with capital P. After that, only then can true contact be made. Make your presence your medicine.
That would be a beautiful spot to end. I love make your presence your medicine. But I did want to ask you one closing question to see if there's a particular challenge or initiation on your own path that you could share, a time when you couldn't see what was going to come next, but you knew you needed to step into it, and you met that challenge.
Like this morning? My back locked up a little bit today. And it was a challenge because we had this meeting. And I was thrust into this place of a little bit of anxiety, you know, a little state of ontological insecurity. Oh, is my being going to be worthy enough to be able to be on Skype with our brother? And then it just reminded me of my early days when I was wrought with physical pain and emotional distress, and I was first beginning my apprenticeship with Don Celso Rojas up in Salas in Chiclayo. And how he knew my level of discomfort and absolutely paid no attention to it. It was like, okay, motive enough for you to be buried alive, Oscar. So he initiated me in the midst of my most severe angst as am I worthy as an aspirant to carry this work forward in the world? I was very young, I mean, late teens, early 20s, into my 30s. Anytime he saw me show up after being in Gringolandia in the United States, going to college, and then I'd go and spend 2-3 months with him, I'd come back and I was contaminated by the gringo mentality, you know, of doing, and accomplishing, and being successful. He would just look at me and say, okay, time for a little Wachuma experience, but buried in the ground with a breathing tube. Okay, so today in the morning when I woke up like that, you know, I was flashed back there, and I just let myself go to that moment where I was in the beaches there, and he had dug with his assistants a grave for me and laid me in the cold sand and put a cheesecloth over my face and a reed for a breathing tube, and little by little filled I was on an incline like this, so there was only maybe 10 inches above my face of wet sand, but the rest of my body felt the weight of that sand like it was a tomb. And on top of it, he put mui mui, which are these little, they use them for bait, the fishermen there, these little crabs, and inside of the sand. So I would feel like these things were crawling over me like maggots. And I was on San Pedro, you know? And I just, what do? You die. So the minute I tuned into that experience and was able to relive it, and I did a little stretching, the lockness in my back took a secondary place. And it, as with everything, it was more my preoccupation with my capacity to be of service to you than the actual physical condition that was ailing me. And once I did that mind shift, it lifted. That's the story.
What a story. I have not heard that one before, and I'm not sure that I would want to experience that, but. Oh,
you will. As a matter of fact, in my more advanced trainings with my most dedicated practitioners of the Pachacuti Mesa tradition, in one of our 9-day retreats, we broke up in groups, and I had everyone dig holes and take turns being buried. This time it was with a plastic breathing tube, you know, yet very similar. It wasn't, we weren't on the San Pedro, but it was still a very powerful experience of surrender. and easier than what I went through, because Don Cecil left me there for hours, you know, and I couldn't, yet everybody had to go through that initiation, and I replicated it to as close to the original experience as possible. And to this day, I receive notes reminding me and thanking me for facilitating their demise and rebirth.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm looking forward to meeting up again whenever our paths cross, hopefully in Cusco in the fall. And perhaps someday I'll have the privilege of having you facilitate my demise as well.
For that, you'll have to come here, where there are sandy beaches. And plus, right after that, I can deposit you here at the Banco Maestro and let that do its work. As long as your Aini is to sing me a song.
It's a deal, Oscar. Thank you so much, my brother.
Missing you. I love you so much. And salutations to this beautiful tribe of SoundsTrue, Path of the Shaman. I love you guys. You're awesome. Awesome. Adios.
Take care.